let people join and then we'll get started. Okay, I think let's go ahead and get started. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Alyssa Rhodes, and I'm an air pollution specialist in the freight transport branch of the Transportation and Toxics Division here at CARB. Welcome to our first informative session on transport refrigeration units and on CARB's regulation development process. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone that if you would prefer to participate today in Spanish, you can do that by selecting the Spanish channel. And you can do this by clicking the language that you would like to hear. And our options today are English and Spanish. In order to only hear the interpreted language, you can select Mute Original Audio. I'd also like to note that we did have a small glitch with our normal interpretation services, but it's important for us to provide simultaneous Spanish translation. So our own staff are going to be translating this event. In case we experience any challenges, we're asking that you please be patient with us. We might need to ask you to slow down or repeat something, but we do thank you for your understanding.
Antes de comenzar, solo quiero recordarles a todos que si prefieren participar hoy en español, seleccionen el canal en español haciendo clic en el idioma que les gustaría escuchar. Las opciones para esta reunión son inglés y español. Para escuchar solo el idioma interpretado, haga clic en silenciar audio original. Además, nos gustaría señalar que tuvimos un problema con los servicios de interpretación. Proporcionar interpretación simultánea en español es importante para nosotros, por lo que nuestro propio personal interpretará este evento. Les pedimos que tengan paciencia con nosotros. Es posible que les pidamos que repitan una pregunta o un comentario o que hablen un poco más lento. Apreciamos su comprensión.
Great, thanks, Gabby. Everyone, bear with me just 1 second. I've got to move her to the interpretation channel. Okay, on we go. So we'd like to ask that you all please mute yourself and rename yourself so that we can see your first name, your last name, and your affiliation, just like the example that's shown here on the screen. In order to rename yourself, you can click on the top right side of your video or your picture. If you do need assistance doing this, please send us a message on the chat and we can help you out. Just as a quick orientation of Zoom, if you aren't speaking, we do ask that you remain on mute. In order to mute or unmute yourself, you're going to click the button at the bottom left of the Zoom screen. And if you are joining us via phone, you can dial *6 in order to mute and unmute yourself. In order to turn on your camera and off, you can just click the camera button that's at the bottom left of the screen. And if you do have a comment or question and would like to be added to the speaking queue, you can use the raise your hand function. If you're joining us today on Zoom, then you can click the participant button and then that will raise your hand. If you're joining us by phone, the raise your hand feature has been a little bit buggy that we've noticed. So if you would like to speak and you're joining us by phone, then you can unmute yourself and so we'll know that you'd like to say something. And then we'll be checking the phone lines periodically. And if you would like to send us a message, you can use the chat function. You can click the chat icon that's near the center bottom of the screen. In order to do that, you can choose private and chat to message either the host or one of our co-hosts. Please do note that all the chats will be archived, including private ones. Okay, so also presenting with me today is Catherine Garrison, and I think they're going to come on camera and wave, and Sam DeMassa, and also Lorenzo Bustos. We'll now start today's event by sharing the purpose. So today's event is meant to be both informative and interactive. We have planned polls and questions to engage you guys all throughout. We'd like to start with the objectives of the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, and then we'd also like to share information about Transport Refrigeration Units, or as we refer to them, TRUs, as well as their operations. We'll also cover what work has already been done in order to address TRU emissions. And we're also interested in what your guys' experience are with this equipment. The other topic we have planned today is what the process looks like for developing a new regulation. And we'd like to highlight where community involvement is most impactful. I'd also like to note that we are planning to have some dedicated times for discussion during the event today and at the end. And we also have a questionnaire for you that we'd like to get your input, how you felt about this event. But just to note, if you do have questions during the event, feel free to send those to us in the chat. Okay, so today we're going to be using the Poll Everywhere feature throughout in order to ask interactive questions to you all. And let me pull down the instructions. So here's the instructions if you would like to participate. You have a few different options. You can either click the link at the top of the screen, or I guess someone will post it in the chat too for ease of access. Thank you. You can also join the poll by texting 22333, or you can also scan the QR code with your phone, and then that should take you directly to the poll. If you have any troubles or issues accessing the poll, please also let us know in the chat, and then we can help you out with that. So to start, we have our first question, and we'd like to know which communities are you all representing tonight? Please feel free, once you're able to log in, to start sending in your responses. Okay, so it looks like we have someone from industry here. We'll give it another minute. Public health, the LA area. Okay, and the school district. Looks like we have a good variety on with us today. Thank you all for coming and for responding. We'll go ahead and move on. Okay, so before we talk about TRUs, here's a quick primer on CARB's work. The agency's mission is to protect public health and fight climate change. When developing strategies to achieve these different objectives, CARB considers these components: community-level issues, attainment of regional air quality standards that are outlined in the state ZIP plan, and also moving California towards its climate change goals that are outlined in the scoping plan and the short-lived climate pollutant reduction strategy document. Reducing emissions from freight, including from TRUs, is critical in order to meet these different objectives. And CARB is also working to meet the directive of Governor's Executive Order N7920. And this directive sets the goal for CARB to transition to off-road vehicles, equipment, and operations to zero emissions by 2035. And just to note, TRUs are included in this off-road equipment category. Okay, so today's event is part of a new community engagement plan component, and this is to help increase the community's participation during the regulation development. The purpose of this community engagement plan is to engage the communities both thoughtfully and intentionally throughout the regulation development process while we seek your guidance. The plan includes different outreach activities, such as informative sessions, just like the one that we're hosting right now, environmental justice tours, webpage updates, flyers and brochures, office hours, questionnaires, and surveys. Okay, so before we start talking about TRUs, we'd just like to know, is anyone that's here tonight already familiar with what TRUs are? You're just going to use the same poll everywhere feature. Oh, looks like you guys got it. So far, everybody does. We'll give it another minute to see if we get some more answers. Okay, well, it looks like everyone here is pretty familiar, but hopefully you all still learned something that's new. So thank you everyone for participating so far, and I'll go ahead and pass this presentation to Sam.
Thanks, Alyssa. We're going to go over what TRUs are next. Transport refrigeration units contain a diesel engine, and they're used to control the environment of temperature-sensitive products during transport, such as food, flowers, or pharmaceuticals. We've got a video for you here with audio from a TRU. And as you can hear, TRUs can be very loud. That's just one TRU. If you've got a lot of them at a distribution center, it's even louder. There's 5 categories of TRUs, the first of which is a trailer TRU. These are used on refrigerated trailers or reefers that detach from the truck cab. Next, we have truck TRUs. These are mounted on straight trucks where the trailer is permanently affixed to the truck cab. Domestic shipping container TRUs are mounted to refrigerated domestic shipping containers or 53-foot containers. They travel by road or by rail. Speaking of rail, we also have railcar TRUs. These are mounted to refrigerated rail cars. Last, we have TRU generator sets or gensets. These are mounted to refrigerated international shipping containers. They provide electricity to those containers when they're in transit, by road, or by rail. There's 3 types of generator set. The one we see in the image is called a clip-on generator set. There's also undermount generator sets, as well as power packs. So now that we've taken a look at the different TRU types, we're going to run another poll. Let us know which TRU types you've seen operating in or near your communities. We're going to give you about 30 seconds on this one to respond. Looks like you guys have seen truck TRUs as well as trailer TRUs. Those are very common. All right, so it looks like it was truck TRUs and potentially trailer TRUs. You might have changed your answer though. Let's move on. So now that we have,
Sorry, Sam, just to jump in, if we could just go a little bit slower for the translation.
sure. So now that we've discussed TRU types, we're going to take a look at TRU operations, and we're going to run another poll. Does anyone here have any guesses as to how many TRUs operate in California, or which type makes up the biggest portion of the TRU population? We're going to give you another 30 seconds or so for that one. It's got 50,000, 2,500, reefer trucks, thousands. Truck TRUs, 50,000. All right, so looks like you guys got your guesses in. You're suspecting that the truck TRUs are the most common. They are easy to see, but trailer TRUs are the largest category we have here in California, with about 160,000 total and about 42,000 operating in California on any given day. And the smallest population there would be the domestic shipping container and rail car TRUs at around only 4,000, but 800 operating here on any given day. TRUs visit various facility types and often congregate in large numbers. These types of facilities include, as we mentioned before, refrigerated warehouses and distribution centers, grocery stores, truck stops, ports, intermodal rail yards, and other facilities where they run for extended periods of time to ensure products remain cold or frozen. And now I'm going to hand it off to Lorenzo to talk about some of the health risks associated with TRU emissions.
Thank you, Sam. Like diesel trucks, TRUs are also powered by diesel engines. TRUs emit fine particulate matter, or PM 2.5, oxides of nitrogen, or NOx, and greenhouse gases, or GHGs for short. The communities near facilities where TRUs operate bear a disproportionate health burden due to their proximity to the TRU's emissions. In this aerial picture of a refrigerated warehouse, as one example, you can see that these facilities where TRUs operate are often near sensitive receptors, such as hospitals, schools, and residential neighborhoods. Fine particulate matter, or PM 2.5, contributes to more fatalities than other air pollutants. PM 2.5 is smaller than the thickness of human hair, and it can lodge deep in the lungs or pass through the lungs to enter the bloodstream and affect the heart, the brain, and other organs. Long-term PM 2.5 exposure can lead to increased risk of heart attacks and heart disease, impaired lung development in children, the development and exacerbation of asthma and other chronic illnesses, and premature death. NOx is a precursor to ozone, and it can damage lung tissue and reduce lung function, and it can lead to or worsen asthma, and other chronic illnesses as well. One of the main reasons to continue reducing emissions from TRUs is to better protect the many near-source, low-income, and disadvantaged communities that experience disproportionately high levels of air pollution and the resulting health impacts. Cumulative health effects occur when there are clusters of facilities where TRUs operate close to residential areas, as shown in this aerial picture here of Salinas, California. The near source cancer risk from these clusters can be over 1,000 chances per million, which is greater than the cancer risk to communities around California's ports and marine terminals from vessel activity, for reference. Here's another poll question for you. The question asks, have you or someone you know been affected by one or more of the illnesses mentioned before? I'll give that a few more seconds, but it looks like 100% have answered yes so far. Okay, thank you for your responses. Now I'll go over how CARB has addressed TRUs. The existing regulation, the TRU Airborne Toxic Control Measure, or TRU ATCM for short, was first adopted in 2004 and aimed to reduce diesel particulate matter. The original TRU ATCM required TRUs to meet the most stringent engine operating standard at the time. You can see in this graph how the allowed level of PM emissions from an engine decreases with each new standard. The TRU ATCM also requires California-based TRUs and TRU generator sets to register with CARB's Equipment Registration System, CARB. Since its adoption almost 20 years ago, the TRU ATCM has been amended 3 times, in 2010, in 2011, and last year. The most recent amendments to the TRU ATCM, which were adopted in February of 2022, are referred to as TRU Part 1. TRU Part 1 focuses on transitioning truck TRUs, which are generally used for local and regional deliveries to zero-emission technology. Part 1 also requires a PM standard for newly manufactured non-truck TRU engines and the use of a lower global warming potential refrigerant. Additional TRU Part 1 requirements include applicable facility registration and reporting, expanded TRU reporting to include all TRUs that operate in California, TRU compliance labels, and fees. Part 1 is the first of 2 regulations to transition TRUs to zero-emission technology. So why do we need to keep addressing TRUs? As we discussed earlier, communities near facilities where TRUs operate bear a disproportionate health burden. So we need to keep working on transitioning all the other TRU classes to zero emission technology. We also need to meet the governor's executive order N7920, which directs CARB to bring off-road equipment to zero emission. Staff plan to transition the remaining TRU classes, referred to as the non-truck TRUs, to zero emission technology with a new regulation that is expected to go to the board in 2026. So before we move on to the next topic on the agenda, we'd like to stop here and ask if there are any questions about any of the information that we just discussed. Okay, I don't see anything in the chat yet, and I don't see any hands up. Well, I have a question for you. Would anyone be willing to share any of their experiences with living near cold storage facilities or living near facilities where TRUs operate, like refrigerated warehouses or even grocery stores, for example? Maybe we can hear from a volunteer or two. Okay, well, there will be more opportunities later on to ask questions or bring up any experiences if anything comes to mind. Was there a question, chat?
Oh, yes, we do have a question in the chat from Dory Chandler. She's asking to clarify that the truck TRUs are under the clean truck standards and all the rest of the TRU classes are considered off-road.
I'll take that one real quick. Dory, all of the TRUs are considered off-road. The TRU itself has a small diesel engine inside of it, and that's what the TRU regulation is regulating. The trucks have a different separate engine, and those are regulated separately. Does that answer your question, Dory?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Looks like that was the only question for now, so I think we can go ahead and move on.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
Alyssa.
you, Lorenzo. Thanks. Okay, so Alyssa here again. So our next segment is going to be a high-level overview of CARB's regulation development process. And before we jump into discussing that, we do have a couple quick exercises that we want to start with. So our first question is if anyone here has already participated in CARB's rulemaking process. Looks like we're already getting answers in, and they have. We'll give it another minute to see if we get any other responses. Okay, well, it looks like everyone that participated has. All right, so we just have another quick question. We'd like to know, when you do hear the term regulation process, what's a word or a phrase that comes to mind? And if you're not sure, that's okay. Hopefully as we go through the information, then you will have a word that comes to mind after. So looks like we go ahead. Oh, workshops. Yes, that's an important part. Oh, here they are trickling in. Proposals, hearing, new, comments, meetings. Yep, it looks like meetings is the most popular word. And that does kind of centrally revolve around a big part of the process, which is outreach. So thank you everyone for participating. Okay, so now getting into the process for developing a rule. So regulation development of CARB can be divided into 3 main stages. And the first stage is pre-regulation development. And this is the phase really when staff are beginning to start research for a new rule. At this stage, staff are looking into the equipment and their operations. And then actually for the next TRU rule, this is where we are now. We're actively working to gather and learn information about the non-truck TRU operations. Just to give an example of the work that we've done, last year we contracted with Foundation for California Community Colleges. We worked with them to administer a survey to different non-truck TRU owners and operators in order to learn more about their fleet operations. And then this pre-regulation development stage also generally includes developing a technology assessment. And a technology assessment assesses the state of technology for that specific equipment. So actually, for the next TRU rule, staff did develop and publish a technology assessment for zero-emission non-truck TRUs. This was last year. We published a draft, and then we did a workshop in the spring. And then we did post the 2022 assessment in October on our website. And then we can actually share the link to that document in the chat in case you're interested in checking it out. And then I'll also mention for this stage that staff may also begin thinking through potential goals for the regulatory concepts for the new rule. Okay, so the second stage of the process is actual reg development. And this is when work with the public starts in order to develop regulatory concepts. Concept development involves outreach and work with our community partners and also industry stakeholders. And it involves solicitation of your guidance throughout the process. While developing the regulatory concepts, staff are also simultaneously conducting technical analysis for implementation of the concept. The technical analysis examines potential impacts to the state's emissions inventory, the costs, the health risk, and there is also an environmental analysis. As mentioned, this regulation development stage is also when the majority of outreach and coordination with community partners and the industry stakeholders happens. This is when communities can get most involved and you can provide your guidance to us. There are several types of outreach activities that occur in this stage, and these include calls, meetings, site visits to facilities, public workshops and work groups. And this is where CARB's engagement plan activities, including environmental justice, or EJ tours for short, will begin. And just to clarify, EJ tours are when CARB staff coordinate with community advocate groups, and then we come out and visit communities that are impacted by the equipment operating in their local neighborhoods. And once we begin regulation development for the next TRU rule, we'll start planning EJ tours. And then if you would like us to come visit your community, you can let us know. Okay, so regulation development also includes publishing rulemaking documents. And these are just some of them, but some of the main documents are the Standardized Regulatory Impact Assessment, and this is an economic analysis, the notice, and this opens the 45-day comment period, the staff report, and this explains the purpose and rationale for their new rule, the environmental analysis, and this analyzes the potential impacts from the rule. And then there's also some other board documents, including a 15-day change packet. And this packet includes changes based on feedback received from both the board and the public. And finally, one of the final components of the regulation development is board consideration. Okay, so at this point, I'll pass it to Catherine, and she's going to go over the final stage of regulation development, and she'll also give us a tour of where to find all these rulemaking documents. Catherine?
Thanks, Alyssa. I will cover, as Alyssa said, the third and final stage of the regulation process, the post-board adoption activities. So staff will prepare a final statement of reason, also known as the FSOR. Staff will submit the FSOR and the final rulemaking package to the Office of Administrative Law, also known as OAL. Once OAL approves the regulation, CARB will begin implementation. The final step is for CARB to seek approval from the United States Environmental Protection Agency. As Alyssa said, I will now take you on a tour of a web page containing rule-making documents. As an example, we wanted to take you to the TRU Part 2 rulemaking table. So this is the amendments that were passed last year. So as the tour, I'm going to take you down to the bottom of the page. The most recent documents are posted to the top. So here we have the public hearing notice and related materials. I wanted to highlight the staff report. Link is right here, also known as the initial statement of reason, or ISOR. And then there's the notice of the public hearing up here. And Alyssa also talked about the economic package, or the standard regulatory impact assessment. For this document, it's Appendix B here. Now I'm going to highlight the 15-day notice. So you'll also find those documents on this rulemaking page. Wanted to also highlight the FSOR and the final statement of reason right here you can find. And then you can also see at the top of the page, which is the most recent information, this regulation received final approval from Office of Administrative Law. That concludes our tour of the webpage. Someone's going to post this webpage in the chat, so you'll be able to take a look at it when you're done. As we transition back to the presentation, I wanted to summarize the 3 main steps in the regulatory process. We have our pre, we have our regulatory development, and hold on just a moment, just doing a little summary of that process. You have the pre, the development, and the post-board. Oh, cool. Yeah, so we got this great graphic here. And you can see we have our pre-regulatory development down at the bottom. And then we have our second part, the regulation development here. The first public workshop, an administrative record opens. Then we have that notice package to Office of Administrative Law. And next, we have the 45-day comment period, which also starts the 1-year clock. Then we have our board consideration, our post-board adoption activities, the final package to Office of Administrative Law, the 1-year clock ends, the regulation becomes effective. So we wanted to highlight the public participation. The yellow bar here shows that effort. So as you can see, public participation can start from now until the board consideration. And at the CARB board meeting, you're welcome to provide comments, verbal or written. CARB's community engagement plan is focused on the regulatory development phase. We wanted to highlight community members are welcome to participate throughout the public participation effort. I wanted to echo Alyssa's invitation for you to reach out to us, communities, if you would like us to meet or tour your community. We'd love to hear from you. On to questions. So at this time, we are done with this presentation. We wanted to share with you, and we wanted to open it for comment, for questions. So if you would please raise your hand or type into the chat, we'll take your questions. Just a moment. looking for those hands raised. Looks like we have no hands raised. Alyssa, do you see any questions in our chat?
I do not.
All right. Well, let's move on to discussion. While we have you here, we thought we might ask some questions and seek more input from you. Was there information that was new or surprising that we presented to you? We welcome you to raise your hand. You can open up, then we'll open up your mic and you can speak, or you can provide information in the chat. These events are for you, so we really would like to hear from you so we know how best to meet your needs. Well, team, I think we'll go on to our next discussion question. Is there something CARB can do to make it easier or to encourage you to participate in the CARB's regulatory process? We're all ears.
I'll just add, if you don't feel comfortable sharing now, either in the chat or out loud, you can also always let us know at our freight email, and we'll show that in one of the future slides.
Perhaps we'll pitch out another discussion question, and then we'll move on to sharing information, like Alyssa said, about our email, if you'd like to think about it and let us know later. Is there information about Transport Refrigeration Unit or Transport Refrigeration Operation that you would like to learn more about? If there's an aspect of that, please do let us know. Oh, I just wanted to test to see if it was working. Yes, we see something here in the chat from Anthony. Thank you. Are you going to go over the new TRU EV regulation rules? That's a good question, Anthony. And so I think what you're wanting to know is if CARB is going to go over the new regulation. Well, right now we're starting the new regulatory effort to transition the other transport refrigeration units to go to zero emission. And these equipment can use a EVSE, electric vehicle supply equipment, to charge that battery. They can also use technology like a shore power connection. So there's one or two things to go over on that. And many CARB regulations include the requirement for deploying the equipment, and we're silent on what that infrastructure would look like. So per se, we wouldn't necessarily call out a regulation for an EVSE. Anthony, did I answer your question? Oh, great. I'm glad I answered that question for you, Anthony. Team, I think maybe we'll go ahead and move on. If we get some more questions in the chat, maybe we could circle back, Alyssa.
Yeah, sounds good. I think we'll have some extra time. So if anyone does have any other questions that they think of, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can answer them. Okay, thank you, Catherine. All right, so I guess, is there a question in the chat? We do have a question. We'll move on, and then if someone on the team could address Dory's question. So before we conclude, we'd like to share a few more helpful links. And if you download the presentation from the TRU meetings and workshops website, and we'll put the link for that in the chat, then you can access all of these links that are shown here on the screen. We first want to invite you to check out our TRU webpage. And this is where all of our TRU related information will be posted. We also have an EJ blog, and then that's where you can find articles as well as updates on several different CARB programs, including TRUs. And then you can also subscribe to this blog in order to receive email updates from the blog. And then we also have a TRU listserv that you can join. And subscribing to this allows you to receive email updates on TRU news specifically. And that way you can stay up to date with any future meetings that we have or any news on the next TRU regulation. And then in addition to TRU updates, we also wanted to show you where you can get some additional information on some of CARB's other programs. You can visit the truck stop, and this includes several different truck resources. So those are just some sample links that you'll see. And then also, if you're looking where you can submit an environmental complaint, we have a website that you can do so. And as you can see in this image, there's several different types of complaints that you're able to submit. And then finally, we have an enforcement data portal. And then this just provides a high-level summary of CARB's enforcement efforts from 2022. And then before we conclude, we actually have a questionnaire that we'd like to invite you all to take in order to give us some feedback on how we did on today's event. The link for that will be posted in the chat. And then if it's easier, there's the QR code that you can scan. And we have some dedicated time now for you all to fill this out. But if you would prefer to do it at a later time, the survey will also be available on our meetings and workshops webpage. And then again, if anyone has any questions that they've thought of, we could also take some more questions now as well. Okay, doesn't look like there's any new questions rolling in the chat, but Dory, would you like to ask your question out loud? It seems like maybe some clarification could help.
Sure, yeah, just curious about how full the TRUs are when they run and if they run when they're empty, just and how the regulation might address that.
Yeah, Dory, I can take that. I just have a clarification question. Are you talking about, say this is a battery electric TRU, for example, are you're talking about the state of charge or the amount of product that TRU is transporting?
Product that it's transporting.
Um, we've got some preliminary data on zero emission TRU operations, and what we've seen suggests that they're typically transporting the same amount of product as a diesel TRU.
Okay. And run times are pretty comparable to diesel?
For some of the categories we've seen, yes.
Okay, thank you.
It is a place where if you've got some data you'd like to share with us, or anyone for that matter, that would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dory, for the question. It doesn't, oh, yes, Catherine.
Yeah, Sam, I thought maybe we could explain a little bit about the operation. So for example, when the trailer is empty before they need to put the freight into the trailer, typically they run the TRU to be able to pull down the trailer, and so that'll protect the temperature sensitive merchandise inside of the trailer. And then the duty cycle for the diesel engine is that it runs the engine for the TRU will run about I think it was like 65% of the time. Sam, do you remember?
I don't have the percentage off the top of my head. Sorry, I don't know that right now, Kathy.
Yeah. So the important thing to note is that when the trailer is at that distribution center or at the grocery store or at the other freight facilities we mentioned, that TRU will be running. It won't be running 100% of the time. It's kind of analogous to your air conditioner in your home, that when you have your air conditioner on, that the engine won't be running 100% of the time. It'll run to keep at that set point that's needed. I hope that provided a little bit more color to your to the operation cycle. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine, for that additional information. Doesn't look like any other questions have come in, so maybe we'll put on some music and we'll give you like a few more minutes to fill out the survey. So let me get that started. Okay, so maybe like 6:05, we can wrap up. Oh, actually, it looks like we have another question in the chat. I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Masa Morimoto. When will the truck TRU and genset TRUs be zero emission? So the truck TRUs, that's part of the 2022 amendments. Those are already transitioning to zero emission. They should finish by 2029. And then the gensets are going to be part of the non-truck TRU rule, but we don't have the concepts yet that's in development, so there's not a timeline for that as of today. But we are planning to address them. I hope that answers your question. You're welcome. Okay, back to the music. It looks like we did get another question in the chat. It says, truck TRU zero emissions rule by 2024, 15% of the fleet will be zero emission if there's not a manufacturer for the reefer or batteries to run. What do you do? So we can put up on the chat the link to our current TRU webpage, and there's information there about extensions. For example, if there's not products available. So could someone from the team grab that link and please share that in the chat? Thank you, Lorenzo. Okay, I think that looks like everything, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. So thank you everybody for joining us today. And then if you do have any additional questions, please feel free to email us at the email that's on the slide, freight@arb.ca.gov. And we hope that you all enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for joining us.